The most basic question in philosophy is, what kind of being am I? The answer to this question about human nature will affect how you see others and how you live. Psychologists have considered the question of whether humans are self-interested or whether unselfish considerations can motivate. Sigmund Freud, for example, held that humans are essentially selfish and aggressive, a view that was also endorsed earlier by the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes. This view was also endorsed by Mark Messier, who argued for psychological egoism, the theory that humans can only act out of our self-interest. Messier claims that introspection reveals that humans always act intentionally to benefit themselves. If you believe that humans are self-interested, this will affect how you interact with others. It will also affect how you think society should be organized. Would a self-interested society be better arranged along socialist or capitalist lines, for example? It will affect how you interact with the universe. If people are maternal beings only, then you might think that death is the end of existence. If you do not believe this, then you might think that the maternal universe is preparation for the spiritual life in another world in the universe. Many people believe that there is life after death. Such accounts ask us to make some fundamental assumptions. First, they ask us to assume that human beings have a self. Second, they ask us to assume that the self is different in form to the body. This is the traditional Western view of human nature. Not everyone accepts it. The rationalistic version of the traditional Western view of human nature. The most influential version of traditional views see humans primarily as thinkers capable of reason. This view is represented in the work of Plato, who believed that humans consisted of appetite, reason, and a spirited element. Reason seeks what is good and right. Their spirited element seeks to assert itself, and appetite involves desire. For Plato, the purpose and destiny of the soul is to be free of its body and ascend to heaven, where it will be united with forms, eternal and perfect ideals that exist in unchanging heavenly world. For Plato, as opposed to Freud, Hobbes, and Messier, humans can control their appetites and their aggression through the use of reason. They are not ruled by self-interested desires, but the ability to exercise control in this way depends on one's past choices. If a person gives in to his non-rational nature, he will lose the ability to control it. For Aristotle, too, reason was also the highest power of humans. Although while Plato held that the truth about human nature involved knowledge of another world only reason could apprehend, Aristotle held that it only required knowledge of this world. Human purpose. Aristotle emphasized that humans have a purpose to do all living things. For Aristotle, as Plato, the use of reason is purpose of human nature. The immaterial and immortal soul. Plato, but not Aristotle, emphasized the spiritual aspect of human nature. In the dialogue, Plato has Socrates argue that the soul, is immortal, and so is immortal. This is because Plato held we are engaged in the activity of knowing, to form something that a physical body cannot carry on. Implications of the traditional realistic view. Aristotle claimed that if one group of person was less rational than another, they would be less than human, and could justifiably be enslaved by those who were more rational. If so, couldn't any form of exploitation be justified on these grounds? So this view has significant implications. It also influenced another version of the traditional view, the Judeo-Christian view of human nature. The Judeo-Christian version of the traditional Western view of human nature. According to the Christians' tradition, humans are made in the image of God. The ability to love and to know, will, and intellect are the defining characteristics of humans in the Judeo-Christian view. These are open to all, regardless of the level of rationality. For the Christian, the way to union with God is through emulating Jesus of Nazareth, in whom we find expression of the highest virtue, love. This view also fosters the idea of a moral self that can choose good or evil. This is not through a denial of rationalistic view. Indeed, the early Christian Saint Augustine agreed that the humans have an eternal and immortal soul, and that the soul is rational. But he maintained that the humans cannot overcome tendencies to do evil without the help of God. He also emphasized the nature of the will, which is our ability to choose between good or evil. The Christian view also agrees with the classical view that humans have a purpose. In the modern world, the rationalist and Christian view of the self have been challenged, especially by the science and philosophy of evolution. The Darwinian challenge. Variation in the struggle of existence and natural selection. Charles Darwin proposed three key ideas. One, that animals and plants are sometimes born by chance with features that are different from those of their parents. One, that animals and plants are sometimes born by chance with features that are different from those of their parents that they can pass on to their offspring. Variations. And that, too, because animals produce more offspring than can survive, they must continuously compete with each other to stay alive. Finally, Darwin argued for survival of the fittest, the notion that the random variations that an animal is born with can give it an advantage in the struggle for survival. Animals with such variations are likely to pass on to the offspring, while those without them are weeded out. This process can make animals gradually change into new species. This also applies to humans, who must have too evolved. This led to a disturbing realization that humans have not always been as they are. Implications for the traditional view. Darwin views have two implications. First, they imply that humans are animals and that the human ability to resolve evolved from capacities among other non-human animals. Second, they undercut the view that humans are designed and have a purpose. Darwin's theory, as contrasted with the notion that each species has been independently created by God, is supported by a number of forms of evidence. First, it explains why species can be classified into different groups that share common characteristics, namely because they evolved from common ancestors. Second, it explains why species are geographically distributed over the earth. Third, bodily characteristics such as structures and shapes are best explained by evolution. Finally, the existence of fossils record proves especially strong support for Darwin's theory. In sum, Darwin argues that his theory provides the best explanation for a number of distinct facts. Many have responded to Darwin, mostly controversial. Some have argued that his theory lacks definitive proof and there is false evidence that is consistent with Darwin's evolution. There are some that attack his claim that there is no fundamental difference between the cognitive abilities of the humans and of the non-human animals. Existentialism holds the humans or whether they make themselves to be. For Jean-Paul Sartre, humans are condemned to be free. They cannot rely on God, for He does not exist, nor on society to justify their actions. The consciousness of this freedom causes anguish. The most anguishing thought of all is that we are responsible for ourselves. When we claim that something external to us is the cause of what we are, we act in bad faith, which occurs when we pretend that we are not free. This provides a profound challenge to the traditional views. If it is not correct, there is no such thing as universal human nature. Many feminists challenge that the traditional view of human nature is sexist. It discriminates against women. Plato assumed that the soul and reason should not rule their body and its desires and emotions. Although Plato thought that men and women were more or less equal, his students Aristotle would claim that women do not share fully in reason. The view that women are subordinate to men was echoed by Augustine. Can we think differently? Are sexist views that assume the inferiority of women to men essential to the traditional view of human nature? Perhaps we should simply throw out the rationalistic view of human nature if it is sexist. Genevieve Lloyd argues that this is not easy as it may appear. If we say that women have just as much reason as men, this would be to imply that reason, the male trait, is superior. If so, it is possible for us to reject the rationalistic view of human nature altogether. To most of us, it is obvious that we have a mind and body, but the mind's subjective consciousness is puzzling. Moreover, those who accept that the mind and the body are distinct are faced with a problem. How can a non-physical object interact with a physical one? Other people hold that only the physical exists. The dualist view of human nature argue an immaterial mind with a material body. Rene Descartes held that the mind and the body were distinct. Since we cannot conceive of the mind existing without the body, on this view, humans are made of two substances. But this view faces the problem of how immaterial mind can move a physical body. How can a physical body affect an immaterial mind? Immaterial. That is a maternal for all this. An immaterial mind. Descartes held that the sense mind and body obviously interact. There must be a point of contact between them. The pineal gland, not everyone accepts this. Gottfried Leibniz held that the mind and body don't really interact at all, but only appear to. While Miller-Brage held that gods synchronize their apparent interactions. The materialist view of human nature are you and your physical body. Hobbes noted that this problem with dualism was that it held that there are two things in human nature. But let us say there is only one, the material body. The operations of the mind will then be explained in terms of the workings of the body. This view that processes such a thought in life are just physical and chemical process. It's often reductionism, the idea that we can completely understand one kind of reality in terms of another kind. It is, however, not clear how a physical phenomenon can produce mental phenomenon. One kind of contemporary materialist view is that the identity theory of a mind that states of consciousness are identical with the states of the brain. This view is held by J.J.C. Smart, but this might run into problems quickly. Brain states that are publicly observable, but mental states are not. Moreover, a mental experience has no location, no color, and no shape. So how can brain states and conscious state be the same, since they are in such very different things? Behaviorism is the view that mental activity can be explained in terms of behavior. For example, Gilbert Ryle held that mental activity could be explained in terms of activities that are associated with, thus to say that John knows that a chair is near is to say that he will behave in certain ways, such as sitting in it. But Hilary Putnam has argued that it's easy to come up with examples to show behaviorism is wrong, such as when one acts as though one is in pain, when one is not actually in pain, despite knowing the appropriate behavior. Another view of human nature is functionalism. This holds that we should explain mental activities and mental states as meditating between perceptual inputs and behavioral outputs. Mental states and activities refer only to the functions they serve and the process that connect our sensory inputs to our behavioral outputs. Functionalism allows that the mental state can explain other mental states. A person's intention, for example, can be explained in terms of her desires and beliefs. The intention is then something that plays the role of linking the sensory stimulation to desire to perform a certain action in light of. the functions seem to leave something out. They're in a consciousness state that we are aware of. Functionalism has led to some philosophers to believe that the human brain is kind of a computer. Some have also argued that when computers can process inputs and outputs like the human brain does, they will be able to think. Alan Turing held that if a computer was so powerful that we could not tell the difference between its answers and those of a human being, the computer has a mind. John Searle opposes this view of human nature. Using his Chinese room thought experiment, he argues that computer lacks consciousness. But Searle is not a dualist. He believes that humans are merely physical creatures. Although the mental states of the physical states produced are not reducible to physical things. Many philosophers believe that only matter exists. Given that difficulties faced by the monolithic views outlined here, eliminative materialists hold that we should eliminate our beliefs in the existence of consciousness and mental state. These fictional realities, like the demons we use to think of, cause some mental disorder. We have no place in science of the mind or brain. New dualists hold not that there are two different kinds of substance in the universe, but that there are two different kinds of properties. These dualists hold that consciousness is not a physical feature of the world, but a non-material property of it. The traditional Western view assumes that you are the same person as you were earlier in your life. It assumes that humans are ourselves that endure through time. But we also sometimes say that a person has changed over time. If, for example, a personality change is a result of brain damage or she suffers from Alzheimer's disease. But even aside from such cases, we need to know how it is that we can say that we are the same person throughout life. This is a problem of personal identity. What makes you the same person across time is the persistence of your body. But if this is the case, we could never become new persons or as a result of brain energy. Moreover, this is what important, then you could not survive your death. Finally, if brain were transplanted between people, when we said that the brain of the body carried the self. The traditional Western view holds that each living human body is a soul. This is me. Descartes held this view, holding that it was continuity of his thinking mind that made him remain the same person as often as he exists. But how do we know that a person's mind continues to be the same over time? John Locke held that Descartes was mistaken for if one soul migrated to another body and lost the memory that it formerly had, we would not say the same person whose soul it was continued to exist. From this, Locke concluded that what makes you a person endure over time is memory. But in response to this, Thomas Reid argued that Locke's view produced contradictions. For example, Tom at age 20 remembers being Tom at age 10. And so it's the same person. Tom at age 30 remembers Tom being age 20, but not being Tom at age 10. Thus, Tom at age 30 is both the same person as the person who was Tom at age 10, and it's not the same person who was Tom at age 10. Also, what if I can remember everything that I did? Some views of human nature deny the existence of a self. Central to Buddhist thought is the idea that all things are composite and transit, and so nothing abides permanently as an individual. The self, like everything else, is a constant state of flux and disintegration as it is transit. As a permanent entity, then the self does not exist. David Hume had a very similar view. He held that we cannot claim that there is an inner self, because of all experience is a constant stream of sensation and no determinate self. These views do not have problems, for it is not clear why we should be considered with our future interests if they are not. It seems obvious that parents should teach their children to be independent and self-sufficient and shun conformity. People should also be true to themselves and be free to live their own lives. These views are based on the view of self as a optimistic, independent of others, and self-sufficient. For Descartes, for example, the real me is interior and existence independently of others. Similarly, Kant held that the core of the real self is the ability to choose the moral laws and moral principles by which one should live one's life. Charles Taylor suggests that there is another way of viewing the self, that who I am depends on my relationships. I need to define who I am. Aristotle also claimed that humans are social animals, while Hegel argued that I cannot be who I am apart from my relationships to others. A free, independent person is one who can choose what course his life will take. We cannot develop this capacity unless others recognize that affirm our self-mastery. The key idea for Hegel is that who you are ultimately depends on your relationship with others. The implications of this are profound. We create strong and weak persons. For example, by the qualities we are willing to recognize in others, thus being powerful and powerless, is a function of our relationship with others. Every person has a culture. Hegel argued that the person's culture is a mirror through which society shows the person who and what she is. Thus, there is no real me outside of the culture context where I am situated. Who is right then? On the one hand, we seem to be only what others make us. On the other hand, we seem to be independent selves with basic qualities that we are born with. Which are we? The choice here is important.